As someone still looking for a job in the game design field, I apply for a lot of game testing opportunities to provide some cash flow in the meantime. These applications tend to consist of surveys, and one thing I've filled out enough to memorize at this point is the question of why you play games and what you get out of them. So, let's go through the checklist and consider what League of Legends really provides. Well, League is certainly social, but I can't say I've made, well, any friends through playing competitively. However, as a game to play with friends, it's perfectly fine. Cooperation is required for optimal gameplay, but as we'll discuss later, there are just as many factors that end up discouraging relying on random teammates. It should also be noted that negative interactions are still interactions, and people who really crave attention aren't afraid to initiate any form of conversation. For those who care about winning and being the best, League is a good place to experience the feeling of winning. Remember to keep these players in mind, as they'll be important later. League is full of potential for learning the many complexities of the game and improving both mechanically and in terms of knowledge. This is clearly a main appeal of the genre. Strategy in League of Legends mostly consists of making decisions, plans, adapting them, and then changing your approach. Undoubtedly, it's a staple of organized play, especially professional play, but strategy becomes less relevant for non-junglers in solo queue. Individual laners mostly play reactively with only small, flexible plans. Action refers to the fun or fast and difficult maneuvers that one might pull off. It's often called mechanics in terms of League of Legends. This is one of the things Riot attempts to appeal the most to in their design philosophy. They create fun champion fantasies for players to fulfill when they're popping off. Among the things I enjoy most about League of Legends is trying to create fun builds and ways to play the game that are more unique to me. But while this is something allowed by the game, I wouldn't say self-expression is a main component of League's formula. Collecting can refer to getting all of the characters in League of Legends, but usually it's used more in the context of a game where you have to collect a lot more items, or collectibles as they tend to be called. So while relevant, I wouldn't really consider it relevant in the context of gameplay. Although there's plenty of lore in the game, almost none of it is truly experienced in the gameplay. It certainly doesn't pull you in, and each game is unique and doesn't follow a continuous story. I would argue a decidedly small part of the player base comes to League for the story. Growing power, options, items, stats, you get some growth per game, and it certainly is satisfying to hit an item breakpoint. And lastly, we have the idea of a life sim, where you nurture a town of some sort, and character relationships between each other. Sims being the classic example, but since Stardew Valley and other contemporary games, it's grown a lot more popular. League doesn't really involve any of these elements at all. Listing it all out, I'd put its appeal in roughly this order. With all that said, now is the perfect time to mention that I find League of Legends to be fun. I'm drawn to the fun aspects of it, and despite the fact that I want to make a video with this title, I haven't given it up. However, for someone who also loves titles like Soulsborne's games, Nuzlocking Pokemon, Fire Emblem, and Dungeons & Dragons, I'm clearly not opposed to games that punish you heavily for failure. But, as any Soulsborne player knows, the most frustrating part about a hard boss is running back to it. League is a win more game. Unlike most sports or FPS games, the reward for completing an objective isn't simply a point that your opponent needs to match. It's gold or stats, an advantage towards achieving another objective. Even worse than this is when, as is often the case in top and jungle, the enemy's goal isn't simply to gain gold, but to deny you as much gold as possible. Some champions have kits revolving around this idea of boxing your opponent out of lane. It makes your teammates' errors or learning as you go much more painful, because it leaves you stuck in a situation where you become less likely to accomplish anything. Compare this to point-based scoring. Being down 20 points makes winning much more difficult, but it doesn't take away any agency or influence on an individual level. And feeling stuck in a game where you have little influence feels bad, almost like being stuck watching a cutscene. In many ways, this actually mirrors a game famous for causing fights and arguments, Monopoly. And as most people know, the entire point of Monopoly is to teach through gameplay how bad it feels to feel stuck, unable to accomplish anything as the winners continue to win more and more around you. Well, there is one way to assert agency on the game, and that's to feed the enemy more gold, which some particularly desperate players will resort to. So while it's true I'm a fan of games that punish you for failure, from a game design perspective, I don't think taking away agency is ever a good punishment. So let's see how this lack of gold and stats impacts the things people come to League for, and how they might lead to aggression. As someone who enjoys pulling off some sick moves, I can tell you that being behind isn't going to stop me from trying to outplay my enemy laner to get back in the game. Unfortunately, being behind is going to make this simply less likely to work out. The real threat, however, is that attempting to make plays against a player who already has a lead can bloat their lead to the point that your team will suffer the consequences. So there tends to be pressure from the team to play safe and abandon this source of fun, because doing so not only reduces their chances of winning, but their own chances to make cool plays. You end up feeling like a passenger, stuck in a game where you can't make plays and instead watch them. That very same pressure to not take risks and play safe makes learning about and mastering the mechanics of your champion harder to do. Well, apart from farming under pressure and running away. Against a good opponent, even trying to farm can be a risk. Ultimately, despite having to continue playing, you rarely feel engaged in improving in mastery. Much like running back to a hard boss doesn't make you better at the boss, but you have to maintain focus or you can die on the way back. It should be noted, some form of improvement is still possible, so a positive attitude can go far in reducing frustration. But, for the most part, it's not the type of improvement you want or are focused on, and it's less engaging than playing on your own terms. If your goal is to win, and to be the best, then losing because of your team is always going to be upsetting. Many people learn to cope with the fact that they can't control all the parameters, and focus on the ones that they can. But that can also lead to frustration when the amount of control you can exert can be brought below your usual tenth by your teammates' actions, or lack thereof. As a few examples, I've had games where I can play a good, clean lane, outfarm my opponent, get a kill or two, but the rest of my team has traded kills a lot bottom side. Even if my team isn't behind, I feel behind due to the huge gold numbers on the enemy team, despite my good play. Another classic example is when the enemy jungle stops by your side of the map a lot, and your jungler doesn't. What is called playing weak side. If played optimally by both sides, the correct choice is to just let yourself fall behind a bit, stay alive, sacrifice yourself so your teammates can get a lead. But after displaying such self-sacrifice, if they don't get a lead, or worse, it's quite infuriating. Even if you aren't left completely alone, a few teammate misplays that involve you or your enemy laner can lead to similar results. Strategy, the domain of the jungler, at least in solo queue. Outside of solo queue, as a personal example, when playing Clash with my friends, I was often a weak side warrior, made to play safe under tower. But I knew this going in, and I could check in with the game plan, give and receive status reports, and feel the enjoyment of the plan all coming together. Even if it didn't, I at least had influence on how the stronger elements on my team played, because my friends care about my opinions. However, due to the difficulty of communicating clearly in solo queue, this isn't likely to work out, even with strangers that you do get along with. As a result, the jungle ends up making and adjusting the plan mostly alone. So, just play jungle if you like that stuff, right? Well, unfortunately, not every teammate is going to like your plans, especially not when they don't prioritize their success. Even worse, no one is going to like them if they fail. So, while they can't take away your agency, they can certainly blame everything on you. Mute all and good luck, junglers. I don't think I have to tell you the entire concept of denying gold is to slow down someone's progression. Eventually, you can still reach your breakpoints, but typically the game will only go that long if your team can hold out while you freeform. We all know they're gonna fight mid instead. And of course, this all leads back to social interactions. Especially with the lack of voice chat, typing during games is harmful to one's performance, so it's much more likely to be done while checked out or with a gray screen. This makes it all the more likely the content of the messages is accusatory, pessimistic about your chances of winning, or just plain old insulting. I've had plenty of pleasant interactions with other players, but they almost always occur during Champ Select, in the first minute after loading in, or while smashing a game so hard there's little worry about the enemy team making a comeback. And that, along with so many other things I've mentioned, can be why it's just so much more fun to be ahead in League of Legends, especially if you're mostly coming to the game for social reasons. In turn, this encourages smurfing or intentionally dropping your elo, which is kind of ironic to think that those most enticed to smurf are probably those trying to have a good social experience, though obviously those coming to the game for action or progression benefit from doing so as well. And you just get to feel like you're better than everyone in the game you're in. Well, it certainly isn't a perfect game. Many MOBAs share the gameplay of good actions being rewarded with an advantage as you push forward towards the main objective, and I certainly think there's value in that formula. I also don't believe the designers considered the game very much from a solo queuing perspective, so I believe the game is much less flawed in the context of playing as a 5-man squad. Regardless, Riot has shown a habit of balancing and designing the game in a way that prioritizes the fun of winners, and those with a significant lead, even at the cost of making the experience more punishing from behind. Unfortunately, this is probably by design, feeding into the psychological phenomena of variable ration reinforcement, commonly used in gambling and by casinos. By making winning and losing more distinct, they can make it feel such that only winning rewards the brain, so a player is more likely to keep queuing up for more games, chasing another win. If winning and losing both provided plenty of fun, then the reward centers of the brain wouldn't behave much differently in either case. If the reward, in this case having a fun game, is a constant, then it is also a less addictive reward. Without getting too far into the morality of variable ration reinforcement in gaming, all this is to say that things are proceeding by design. With the right mindset, at least one friend, and playing around the game properly, I do find a lot of value in it that I don't get elsewhere. But I personally wouldn't want to design a game that ever feels unfun, like League can, or that can bring out the worst in people just trying to have a good time. Well, that's about all I have to say on the topic. I do have more thoughts on League, particularly on ARAM and how it used to be more fun when, well, people actually had to play a random champion. If you want me to share them, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I have a series related to game design I have to work on, so bye.